What are your three levels?
To the immune system.
The barrier. So your first level of protection is skin and mucous membranes, right? What's the purpose of that?
Pathogens.
To keep the pathogens out of your body in the first place. Then, what makes your skin and mucous membranes effective? Do you remember? What's in between the cells? Keep them together? Tight junctions. What's inside your epithelial cells that helps to toughen them? Keratin. What's on the surface of your skin here?
Sebum.
Sebum. And why might that help?
Makes bacteria not likely to grow. It makes it like
Slightly acidic in nature, so it makes it more difficult to reproduce. And then what do we have up here in our lungs? Mucus. And it does what to the pathogens? Traps them. And then the cilia move it into the back of your throat and it goes to your stomach, where what takes care of them? Hydrochloric acid, which would denature most anything that comes into contact with them. So those are going to be your innate, external, your first line of defense. So your secondary line of defense is going to be your innate immunity. And what did you need to remember about innate? It's stuff that you are born with, ready to go. Is it specific against a specific pathogen? No, it's very broad, very generic, just to keep the pathogen numbers in control, possibly eliminate them if they could. But getting it ready for your third line of defense. And now that you've been through it, you understand why you've got to keep them in line. Because it's going to take somewhere between 3 and 7 days to ramp up your adaptive immune defenses. And in that meantime, if it's bacterial or viral, what's the virus or bacteria doing? Reproducing, getting out of control. So we want to try to keep it under wraps until you get your third line of defense up. All right, so what are some examples of phagocytes? Monocytes. So monocytes turn into macrophages. And what is their mode of killing? How do they kill a pathogen? Hydrogen peroxide and hypochlorous acid. So remember, this is like bleach, so it's hypochlorous acid. And they keep it in vesicles, so when they phagocytize it, then they merge that bacterium with a lysosome and it kills them, or a vesicle filled with that kind of stuff. Then what's another type? What would be your number one antigen presenting cell? Dendritic cells. And where do you typically find dendritic cells in your body? Underneath the mucous membranes and underneath the skin. Why would they be in those locations?
Because most likely where pathogens and stuff is going to get in.
Most likely to enter your body through those types of openings. And then we had another phagocyte which is especially good at attacking parasites. Eosinophils. And let's see, do we have 4? Eosinophils. Oh yeah, neutrophils. And neutrophils are known for attacking what specifically? Bacteria. And they're going to use the same mode of action that your macrophages are going to use. Okay, NK cells. What you want to do here is know their targets and know how they kill. So think about NK cells. These are going to target cancer cells, cells infected with certain viruses. So what do those two have in common? How is an NK cell going to recognize that this pathogen or this homeostatic imbalance is occurring in the body? Antigens. Remember that term? It's all based upon antigens, because if it's cancer or if it's a virus infected cell, that's kind of going to be more like an internal, an inside of the cell problem. And so how are these cells going to let your NK cells know that something's going haywire? They're going to stick proteins on the surface of their plasma membrane that those NK cells are not going to recognize as self. They're going to be non-self, so that will trigger them to then kill them. And perforants. That one's kind of easy. What do those cells do to get rid of the virus-infected cell or the cancer cell? Put a hole in it, and you got a hole in it, you can't maintain homeostasis, and they die. Okay, what do you want to remember about basophils and mast cells? Inflammation. So how do they do it? What's the chemical that's going to trigger it? Histamine. And we'll get into that in more details here. So first, next up, complement. Why did they name that complement? Complements the actions of? No. Complements the action. There's a reason that they're named complement, because they work with another protein. They complement the actions of this other protein. Immunoglobulins, so antibodies. Because remember, antibodies stick to and mark pathogens for destruction. Complement, basically do the same thing. So I did notice that in this chapter, and also in the digestive system chapter, there's a lot of lists of 3 and 4 things. You guys ought to know by now, whenever I have a list of 3 or 4 things to play with, they make for perfect multiple choice questions. Yeah, you know that about me by now, so pay attention when you're studying to those lists. It's like, I have to be able to recognize what doesn't belong in this freaking list. All right, so when we look at the picture, there's cell lysis. That's one of the things that complement proteins do, and that's very similar to, yeah, it looks just like a perforin. They just have to give it a different name. It's made with complement proteins instead of with perforins. And then complement proteins can stick to basophils and mast cells, causing them to degranulate, releasing their histamine, enhancing inflammation. Why does this neutralize the virus? Changes its shape, so it will no longer fit in the receptor. If it doesn't fit the receptor, it cannot be invited into the cell to infect the cell. And then enhancing phagocytosis, making them tasty, giving it a handle for the phagocyte to grab onto so that it's easier to get hold of them. So those are your 4 things that complement proteins do to get rid of pathogens. Okay, big broad question. What is a cytokine? You guys remember? Because a cytokine is an umbrella term. Any chemical that helps to coordinate the immune response. That's why it's so broad. So is this an extensive list of cytokines here? Hell no. This is just the very tip of the iceberg here. This is just an example of all the different cytokines in your body. So tumor necrosis factor, TNF, this is going to be secreted by a macrophage in the site of a problem to bring other macrophages. It's like a call for help. Hey, we need some help getting rid of this pathogen in the site. Interferons, viral replication. Do you remember how they work?
It puts the virus in there outside say, hey, don't replicate,
It goes to neighboring cells.
There you go. So it makes the interferon then binds to the neighboring cell, and you're communicating with that neighboring cell saying, hey, there's viruses in this area, don't make copies of them. So that will then slow down the spread of that virus. And then the third type of protective protein is an interleukin. That one talks to you. Inter, in between, leukin, white blood cells. So this is a means for one white blood cell to communicate with another white blood cell. And I always think about this with the military in mind. We've got the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the reserves. When we are fighting a battle, do they all have to communicate with each other to coordinate a response? Yes, that's what interleukins do, except with our white blood cells instead of with the military. All right, so that's an example of some cytokines. Then we have the inflammatory response. Now, I consider the inflammatory response to be fairly important. Do you guys understand now why?
Yeah.
First step of healing. So think about inflammation. When you cut yourself, it gets inflamed, right? I know it hurts, I know it's uncomfortable, but why is that helping you? Why is that big rush of plasma and stuff coming into that area actually helping you?
Cleaning bacteria.
Okay, so first thing, it's like flushing the toilet. We might have some bacteria, some virus particles, some dirt, whatever, debris in there. And if I bring in a whole bunch of fluids, where are those excess fluids eventually going to make it into? The lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system then filters, and it's your first line of defense. It's taking a survey of those fluids to see if there's any bacteria or virus particles in there, which will then help you fight them off faster. So it's like an early warning system. Second, what else is that excess plasma bringing into that area, that wound that you just created? White blood cells, which are going to fight it off directly. And then it's also bringing in nutrients, because what will we use those nutrients for? Repair, mitotic cell divisions. So it really does help speed up the rate. Could you imagine if you slowed down that inflammatory response, you're not delivering as many nutrients? How long is it now going to take to undergo mitotic cell divisions to heal that? It's going to take longer time. So you need to be able to tell me cardinal signs of the inflammatory response and the response here. So what I want you to do is match it up. You see redness, heat, pain, and swelling. What causes the redness?
The amount of red blood cells coming through.
See, it's a vasodilation of arterioles. You're increasing blood flow into that area. So yes, it is red blood cells, but you want to equate that with vasodilations, increased blood flow, because when you just look at your skin, you don't usually see it as bright red as when you're inflamed. What is going to cause the heat? Two things. Vasodilation of arterioles, because that's bringing in blood from your core, which is going to be warmer than the blood on the surface of your body, and ATP production. If we've started the repair process, one of the metabolic byproducts of making ATP is heat. So that's going to heat up the area as you repair. What's going to cause the pain? Oh, those words again. Let's see if the old man can remember them. Bradykinin and leukotrienes and prostaglandins. Those are the three chemicals. And then there's one other thing that can cause pain too. What's that? What?
I put swelling.
Yeah, it's the pressure.
Okay.
So as you increase pressure, what happens every time you squeeze on a neuron? It's like, bitch, stop. That hurts. So pressure on a nerve is going to cause pain. And the swelling.
The capillaries.
Oh, the increase in permeability of capillaries.
Leaky capillaries. There you go. So, yes, the vasodilation contributes to swelling, but the primary reason for the swelling is the histamine making the capillaries leaky. And that also relates to when we did that sepsis case study. A systemic release of histamine is going to cause all the capillaries in your entire body to get leaky. That increases the amount of interstitial fluid, but it's at the expense of blood plasma. So what does it do to your volume of blood? Decreases blood volume, which will do what to your blood pressure? Decrease it, and it can be precipitous to the point where it freaking kills you because you're not able to pump enough blood to keep your cells alive. All right, which is the main reason we have normal blood pressure. All right, who's going to be the first white blood cell on premises to any wound? Macrophages. Why?
They're everywhere.
They live there. Then who's going to be second? Neutrophils. Why?
They're in the blood cells.
They're the most common in your bloodstream, so they come out in hordes. And then who's going to be third? Who? What? No. No. Monocytes. Remember monocytes? Because we call them the recruits. Because as soon as monocytes come out of the bloodstream, what do they turn into? More macrophages. And then all of those white blood cells are going to be releasing chemicals, which causes what to happen in your bone marrow? That word. No, we're not making new red blood cells. We're making new white blood cells. What's that process? Leukocytosis. Isn't it leukocytosis? Yeah, leukocytosis. You're crossbreeding gluconeogenesis. Let's take the two words and just breed them. It's like, here's a horse, here's a donkey. Let's have sex. Okay.
That's how you
What,
get a mule.
what was the word chemotaxis mean?
Movement by chemicals.
That's how your white blood cells always find an area that has been damaged, because whenever you damage anything, whether it's a cut or a wound from crush, you're going to have abnormal chemicals released into the interstitial fluid, and that's always how they find their location. So here you go. Who's first on the scene? Macrophages. Who's second? Neutrophils come out of the bloodstream. Who's third? More monocytes come along and then reinforce the macrophages that are there, and then they're all releasing their chemicals, their interleukins, and triggering leukocytosis in your white bone marrow, and creating new white blood cells. Okay. This was good information to know, but not testing you on how ibuprofen and stuff like that work, but I would hope that you'd want to know how it works just because you're interested in healthcare. And then fever, what's the basic premise of fever? How does it possibly help? It increases the metabolic rate of everything. So that means that you're going to be undergoing mitosis more quickly. You're going to be making ATP more quickly. The activity of your white blood cells, they're going to be more angry and really aggressive. So
is the fever, is the increased temperature a result of the higher metabolic rate, or is the higher metabolic rate because of the?
No, what happens is your white blood cells are going to release a chemical called pyrogens. And if you remember, your hypothalamus is the center, your thermostat of your body. Those pyrogens make your hypothalamus turn up your body temperature. And then your hypothalamus will trigger probably more ATP production. And that is then going to raise your body temperature up. Probably shuts down some of the mechanisms for getting rid of heat as another way to increase body temperature. Have any of you in here ever been going down that road of you're losing control of body temperature? Has anybody gotten to that 106, 107 point in here? Because that's like super, super dangerous.
103 and a half, like 0.5, I think is the highest I've ever had.
Yeah, I've never come close to that, and I'm very grateful because that would be freaking scary.
When I was young,
What?
I mean, maybe I was more. I know I was younger when I had it.
Oh,
Sorry.
no.
I think I had a 102 last winter.
Yeah,
I don't
if
know.
you start getting up there at 104, 105, 106, what do you need to do? Well, yeah, or jump in an ice bath, something to
That
cool you
sucks.
off. Because it's
Especially when
not
you're
good.
that hot and you're trying to get into
A
one.
warm bath and a warm shower.
Luke.
Luke, like
Yeah.
you can't do ice cold because it'll send your body into shock.
Well,
Oh my gosh, you just killed all of us by telling us
But
to
yeah,
get
that's
You
like
know
cooler
that-
than-
Lawsuit.
when
We're
there
all
are
dead.
people in the summertime, like construction workers who have lost control and they're no longer sweating and their body temperature's up at 107, they're gonna jump into they're gonna put ice on them because they need to bring that temperature down. So no, I'm not killing you with that suggestion. I know, I can see the weenies now. Ooh, it's too cold, I'm not gonna get in.
When
Warm
your
bath over
temperature's
there.
up there though, it does hurt to get in it.
I know,
It
because
hurts
it's
worse
a
than normal.
big difference at that point in time. It's like, this water's only 80 degrees. Oh, shit, it's cold. All right, so pyrogens. Then, okay, how do we activate T cells and B cells? We have to put antigens on what proteins? MHC, major histocompatibility complex. And we have two types, MHC class 1 and MHC class 2. MHC class 1 are found on what cells of the body? All nucleated cells. So why do they put that nucleated in that sentence? What cells are they excluding? Red blood cells, because they're not going to be involved in this fight against any kind of pathogen. So basically, every single cell with a nucleus in your body has a class 1 MHC protein. And if you put a pathogen, a foreign antigen, on a class 1 MHC protein, who are you normally going to try to activate? Cytotoxic T cells, because many of these will have an intracellular problem. That's why they're able to alert you. I got something wrong with me. Hey, let's look at this. And if you put a pathogen or a foreign antigen on an MHC class 2 protein, who are you typically trying to activate? Helper T cells. If I activate a helper T cell, what are the 3 things that a helper T cell will do to help your body get rid of that pathogen? Activate who? It will activate B cells. It will help to, it causes activation and proliferation of B cells, activation and proliferation of cytotoxic T cells, and it enhances phagocytosis, especially those macrophages. And now, please keep in mind, that sounds really, really simple, but what we're not talking about here is once I activate B cells, once I activate cytotoxic T cells, and once I activate the macrophages, what are they also releasing a ton of now? Interleukins. And what are those interleukins doing to the rest of the immune system? Ramping it up. So even though it doesn't sound like your helper T cells are really doing that much, because I only give you a list of 3 things, that covers all except your skin and mucous membranes. And it even covers part of your skin, because remember, my acquaintance back at Mizzou was growing mold in his teeth. That's saliva. That's part of our external barriers. So you need to activate those B cells to put the antibodies in your tears, antibodies in your saliva. So it even does have an impact on your skin and mucous membranes. Lysozyme in your saliva, that's another product which gets activated by these interleukins. And then how do cytotoxic T cells destroy their prey?
You throw up in them.
Perforate and then throw up. What's in that throw up? Digestive enzymes, which will catabolize their DNA and all the insides, and so it kills them quite effectively. Yeah, you guys remember that. It's like, yeah, put a hole in them, puke in that hole. It's like, I'm gonna kill you. Yeah. All right, so there's your MHC class 1, MHC class 2, and your dendritic cell. The reason why it's the most important APC is because it can present on either 1 or 2. So that's why it's so